Good afternoon, everyone. I think we have a few more folks planning to join us. So we're going to get started here. And as you can see on the screen, we are the North State Forestry Collaborative, and this is the Forestry Workforce event. So I'm sure many of you are representing industry, schools, hopefully some students even interested in learning more about these kinds of careers and opportunities. And I'm just going to quickly introduce myself and then our speakers, go through the agenda, and we will get started with the bulk of this event. We only have an hour. Introduce myself. Heidi, I am Heidi Drum, and I am the CEO of the Tahoe Prosperity Center. We are one of the partners that you see the logos there on the right side, representing the North State Forestry Collaborative. So this is an effort with our California Stewardship Network partners, Monterey Bay Economic Partnership, 3 Core in Chico, the Redwood Coast Rural Action Alliance up there in the north part of the state, and our other wonderful partners, Sierra Business Council, representing the Sierra Nevada region. So next slide, please. And the important thing to keep in mind today is that it's just an hour. We've got 2 really awesome presentations and this very fun video at the end that we want to have time to share with everybody. The webinar is being recorded, so you can share it with others later, and it will all be posted on a website that we will have listed here in the chat. So really appreciate everyone attending today and sharing this information later. Sadly, because we only have an hour and we have really awesome presentations, we won't really be able to take questions and answers. But if you feel like you have a burning question or a clarifying question that you think would benefit everyone, please put it in the chat. Because we will be monitoring that. And if we have time to ask that clarifying question, we will. But if we don't, put your contact information in there as well, so that we are sure to be able to get back to you with the answers to that questions. So next slide. A huge thank you to the Morgan Family Foundation. Becky and Jim Morgan, many years ago, created this foundation with a very long-term view of sustainable regional leadership throughout the state. And that, in essence, created the California Stewardship Network, of which you see all these partners are a part of, plus many more around the state. This particular focus is a grant that they were generous to support us with, to really be thinking long-term about the need of fire mitigation and forest management and those other important factors that we're all dealing with on an important basis right now. And so we're really appreciative for their funding of this effort and the support that has gone into this collaboration. I also really have to thank Haley Mears behind the scenes, running the slides at the very last minute with our little glitch that we had, as well as Maya Reed for all the logistical support that Monterey Bay Economic Partnership has given to the Tahoe Prosperity Center and our partners in this effort. And I also just want to thank all of our partners. You're going to hear from a few of them today, but you see those logos there and you can reach out individually. And I see that folks are starting to put where they're from in the chat. I think that's a great idea. And if you want to share your contact information, go ahead and do that as well. So next slide, please. I am happy to turn this over first to Courtney Farrell and Haley Stone. They both work with the North State Planning and Development Collaborative at California State University in Chico. Courtney has over 20 years experience in economic and community development. She's also been a project manager in funding development focus, and is one of our key partners in this effort to share with you the Forest Sector Workforce Needs Survey. Haley, the other Haley, we have 2 Haleys on today. Haley Mears behind the scenes at Monterey Bay Economic Partnership, and Haley Stone will be presenting the Workforce Needs Survey. And Haley Stone has a BA in Geography and Planning, a certificate in Rural and Town Planning, a minor in Diversity Studies, and a master's degree in Public Administration from CSU Chico. So we have 2 excellent folks here who are going to share some of the results from the Forest Sector Workforce Needs Survey. As I mentioned, clarifying questions in the chat, please. And I am now happy to turn it over. Courtney and Haley, you guys can start your videos and take over. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Heidi. And thank you to the partnership for inviting my colleague Haley and myself here today. We're happy to participate in this effort and give you a little bit of background of how we embarked on this initiative. And then Haley will go into more detail of exactly what the work that we're doing around this partnership. And so real quick overview, about 4 or 5 years ago, we started with the Industry Sector Partnership Initiative with our Workforce Investment Board here in Northern California, NORTEC, where we were really looking at identifying the hard to fill critical skills, needs, abilities of our industry sector leaders. And this led to a greater initiative where we initially started in ag and manufacturing. Now we've moved into other industry sectors, the forest sector being one, which is now our first statewide effort. The primary function of our organizations is that we really try to provide the data and the baseline information to inform and educate processes and initiatives like this. And so, well, as we were doing this, really collecting that primary data, collecting the primary data in other sectors too, that looking at the educational curriculum and the vocational training that's available, and then hopefully identifying where those gaps and additional needs are. So again, our ultimate goal is that hopefully industry and education and training are talking and collaborating with each other. And this is a tool and a resource in terms of our data collection that can help, again, inform that process. For the Morgan Family Foundation project, when we learned about it, we were informed that the data component was something that would be really helpful and a part that they were hoping to accomplish sort of in this multi-regional effort. And so we were happy to provide this data. We're in the process right now, so this is still a project that's it's happening right now, real time. And I know Haley's going to share some of those results that we do know of. But this is something that we were, again, pleased to contribute to this project and happy to be a partner on, because we know that the outcomes of this effort is really critical, especially to our forest management, wood product, and other related industries in that sector. So our partner on this one is the statewide Wildfire and Forest Resiliency Task Force, which we're very pleased to be working with. And so with that, I will turn it over to my colleague Haley, and she will give you more information about our efforts. Thank you.
Hi, thank you, Courtney. Can you please advance the slide? Thank you. So we are working, like what Courtney said, with the statewide Forest Resiliency Task Force on a forest sector workforce needs survey. And it's our first statewide effort. We're trying to gauge workforce needs across the state within the sector. We're reaching out to a variety of businesses, private, public, co-ops, all different kinds of businesses we're hoping to hear for and learn from about their workforce needs and their skills and training needs, so we can understand on a regional basis, once we aggregate the data, where the largest need is throughout the state, and hopefully can inform the task force with some data that they can use to make some decisions on future funding and workforce development efforts. So I'll be presenting some preliminary results today from our survey. We kicked it off in June of this year, and it's still an ongoing effort, but we're getting ready to wrap up the survey. My information is there on the slide, but it looks like it might not be, it's a little blocked out. So I'm going to throw my email into the chat for everyone too. And if you're interested in taking our survey, if you haven't taken it yet, reach out to me and I can make sure that you get the information that you need in order to do so. Please advance the slide. So like I said, we're reaching out to a variety of different ownership type businesses that all work within the forest sector throughout the entire state. And so our largest kind of subsector that we've heard from so far is public agencies, if you combine federal, state, and local government together. And then private, with nonprofit coming in closely as a third. And so we're trying to understand how different workforce needs are the same across each of these ownership types, and then also where there may be some differences. And the map on the right of the slide there shows kind of in a heat map style of where we've had the best luck so far with getting responses, and then where those would be the darker counties, and then the lighter counties are where we're still trying to focus our efforts to try to get as many responses as possible so that we can make sure our data is truly representative of the sector across the state. Advance the slide, please. Some of the different questions that we've asked folks throughout our survey are about the type of position and number of positions that they're looking to hire, as well as their hiring timeline. So you can see that most folks are looking to hire 1 to 5 employees within the next 12 months or immediately. And the graphics there are broken out by seasonal workers, part-time workers, and full-time workers. So there's quite a need across the state so far, especially with full-time employment and also with seasonal employment. And then we also are asking folks to let us know what their preferred methods of recruitment are, so we can kind of try and crosswalk that with how successful they are with their hiring. So we've got mostly recommendations and word of mouth seem to be the most common, with online and internal recruitment coming in as a second and third. Please advance the slide. We are trying to gauge from our respondents which positions are most critical and which are hardest to fill. So we can try to categorize those based on educational programs within the regions that the respondents have identified them by. And so you can see that management positions are one of the most critical and hardest to fill, and then as well as laborers and kind of that technical boots on the ground level of work. And then we just average out the average hourly wage and the total vacancies. We asked our respondents to provide us with an hourly wage for these positions, as well as a number of vacancies that they have within their entity. Advance the slide, please. Okay, another thing that we're trying to gauge is an understanding for why these positions might be hard to fill for different organizations and entities. And there's a variety of reasons, but mostly comes down to not being enough candidates within the area. Sometimes it's hard to attract workers to relocate, or there might not be educational opportunities and training programs available within the region to provide potential employees with the skills and training necessary in order to fill the positions that are hardest to fill and most critical. And prior work experience and on-the-job training were identified as the two highest responses for how the skills are usually obtained for these sorts of things. So we're trying to identify areas where we can offer or provide information for folks to be able to get some of that on-the-job training, and identify different employers that offer either internships or apprenticeship type programs to help increase the the skills and the training across the workforce in general. And then that is our preliminary data results. Like I said, we are getting ready to wrap up that survey here shortly in the next week or so. But I did provide my email address into the chat, and I'll throw it in there one last time. So you can feel free to reach out to me, and I can send you the information and the link for the survey. And even if you don't think that you may not be the right person to take that survey, we would appreciate if you would be willing to send it out throughout your networks, so we can try to get as big of a representative sample as possible to reflect workforce needs across the sector throughout the entire state. And also feel free to reach out to me if you have any follow-up questions after the presentation. Thank you for having us.
Haley, you're way ahead of schedule, so that is awesome. I just put in the chat that if anybody has any clarifying questions, to go ahead and use the opportunity in the chat to do that. Haley did put in her email there, so you can reach out to her directly. And Haley, could you at least remind everyone when the final survey will be done?
Yes, so our this survey is part of a larger effort. It's not the only part of the study that we're doing, but we're hoping that all the results and report will be ready by the end of November. And then the task force will distribute that accordingly. I'm sure we'll probably have it posted somewhere on our website, on our North State Planning and Development Collective website. And then there may be some upcoming presentations that are related to the study that we've done, but that will be determined by the statewide task force.
Thanks, Haley. End of November is just around the corner, so that's
Yes.
great. Maybe just a quick 2-minute version of the overall bigger project and study and how the task force work maybe relates. Just a quick general overview would be helpful.
Sure, of course. So we started this effort to try to fill in some data gaps with real time and like present day data, because a lot of the labor market data and job related data that you see that's publicly available is from like 2019 or prior. And so we were trying to get an understanding of the current landscape within the workforce for the forest sector. So part of our effort is to look at those publicly available data sources, as well as using MC, which is a labor market information data warehouse. And so we're combining information from those sources with the kind of more real-time, up-to-date information that we're gathering throughout our survey effort to try to paint a more realistic and real-time picture of the workforce needs as they are, you know, today in 2021, especially after the extreme wildfire impacts that we see across the state. And then additionally, we're using information from that data analysis to do a projected workforce growth and demand, as well as some economic modeling to try to understand how the state might be able to increase their workforce in order to meet some of the goals that the state and the governor has to treat 1 million acres per year. And then so all of those components will be wrapped up into our final consolidated report.
Awesome. Thank you, Haley. So again, everybody be on the lookout. I did post in the chat the links to the website where the results of this survey and the final project will be, and you can get, you know, more information on some of those real-time opportunities and things along those lines. There is one quick question we'll ask before we turn it over to Josh. Tamara asked, what is the name of the data warehouse? Oh, MC, I think MC is an online data warehouse service that you can find out. EMSI is where you can look them up.
Yeah.
And so with that, I am now happy to introduce Josh Metz. He is the co-founder of the Monterey Bay DART project, which you're all going to learn about. And DART stands for Drone Automation and Robotics Technologies. And he is, in addition to co-founding the Monterey Bay DART effort, he is the Senior Economic Development Advisor with the Regional Government Services Authority. I saw him on a totally separate Zoom a couple of weeks ago regarding his work over there. So he has a variety of experience and information and background. He holds a master's degree in landscape architecture from UC Berkeley and completed postgraduate research in spatial data systems and remote sensing at UC Santa Barbara. So one of my favorite places, but Monterey is an awesome community, and there are some really cool things that you wouldn't necessarily link to forestry in, you know, in your mind initially, but Josh is here to tell us how it links and what the future looks like. And I will pass it on to Josh now. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Heidi. And hard to say what the future looks like, but we can at least point out some trends and some ideas that we are working with in the Monterey area and broadly around the state, really to leverage emerging technologies to solve some of our challenging problems. So maybe we could just move to the next slide. And I'm going to tell you about this project that we've undertaken under the work of the North State Forestry Group. And thank you to the Morgan Family Foundation. And I'll walk you through some of the ways these emerging tools, in particular flying robots in the form of drones, have potential to be beneficial for looking at solving and addressing some of the forestry challenges that our state's facing. So next slide, please. Yeah, so this project was funded by the Morgan Family Foundation, and we used the counties, 31 of 58 counties in this project study area as our sort of geographic boundaries. We used a similar tool to MC called Jobs EQ. It's just another one of these workforce data warehouse and analytical tools to generate some of the findings that I'll show you. And I am not alone in completing this work. I did it with a group of collaborators, largely based at UC Santa Cruz. And so, yeah, that's we were focused on trying to understand the demand to some extent for drone pilot expertise and kind of geospatial related expertise in forestry related job types, in particular related to existing federal, data, Bureau of Labor Statistics data, to see if they're suggesting any trends in hiring and skills that people would want to consider in building a career path. And then talk about some things we're seeing, at the leading edge of how these tools are being used and developed for use. So next slide, please. Yeah, so, this is the coincident occurrence of, all these climate-driven wildfires. I've lived in California my whole life, and I think it was in 2008 we had, at least the year sticks out to me as the one where there was just this massive amount of fires all lit at once by a big electrical storm that came through the North Coast. And it just seems like ever since then, different parts of the state have been, heavily impacted. I don't need to tell any of you that, but even in the hills above Santa Cruz last year, we had a massive fire that we all had to evacuate for. So, there's a big challenge, and part of that is having a sense of what's going on across the landscape. And that's where these tools, uncrewed aerial systems with different remote sensing capabilities, are so valuable. They allow the mapping of landscape conditions, and then, of course, the monitoring of conditions over time. They also are useful in various dispersal functions, whether it's lighting controlled fires or even seed dispersal for forest recovery. And then I would say the leading edge of development in the space has to do with using these uncrewed systems for movement of goods and cargo, and that would be, potentially valuable for remote work, and not the kind where I'm sitting in my little box office here looking out, but actual remote in the landscape work, supporting, for example, wildfire crews, and potentially being able to continue air operations even in difficult visibility situations. So the next slide, please. So yeah, so just to characterize some more of the opportunity, the drone market is a massive market globally, and is expected to continue to grow. So if you're looking for, jobs of the future, skills that will, retain and grow in value, you might want to pay attention to growing markets like this. And really, it is, the workforce that we're focused on in this conversation. So, a lot of our young people looking for pathways to the future, this is a good place to look. So next slide, please. Yeah, so our study looked at a variety of criteria for kind of understanding the educational landscape, and this is simply one. There is recognizing the rapid growth in drone use across a range of sectors. The FAA created a uncrewed aerial systems collegiate training initiative, which is designed to recognize institutions that are particularly focused on preparing students for careers using drones and those technologies. Now, as you'll hear in the later slides and in the following video, this is not being a part of this training initiative, which is very recent. It was just rolled out in the last couple years, is by no means the extent of available pathways into working with geospatial technologies. There are many institutions in the state, some listed here, others not listed, that do provide geospatial training. I'd call out in particular my bachelor's degree alma mater, Humboldt State University, for having back in the early 90s provided me an introduction to the whole geospatial world. And I know those educational programs are widespread in the California State University system, the community colleges, and the university system. So this particular table just calls out of the 630 community colleges, trade schools, and universities in our state, only 10 are formally enrolled in this UAS Collegiate Training Initiative, which is, basically provides pathway to expertise and funding that may be valuable for colleges to be aware of. So that's why we wanted to highlight this here. Next slide, please. Another piece of education that's needed for operating drones in a commercial setting is this thing called the Part 107 Certified Drone Pilot certification. And this is a not that hard to obtain certification, but one that with that in hand, someone with interest in this space could begin, officially charging for the services of operating a drone in a commercial setting. And you can see that one need only be 16 years old with some very basic additional criteria to be able to obtain this certification. So I think it's a great way to, again, point to the younger folks who may be looking for their first entree into using these tools in a forestry related setting. I can tell you from my own career path background, I spent time in working with the Forest Service right out of college, and actually doing forest related mapping and monitoring work. And I can both on the North Coast around the Humboldt and Trinity areas, as well as up around the Sierras, all the way up to the North Coast and around Lake Tahoe quite extensively. And I can remember more than once standing out in the midst of some dense brush, just wishing that we had something that could fly above us and take a picture of what we were trying to map, much easier than us walking through the brush. But that said, it was that initial foray into that field that then led to increased interest in the geospatial tools or potential across the range of problems we were dealing with, and then eventually into more urban related planning and economic development. So there is a pathway that people can take that allows for quite a variation in the way that one ends up in their career, taking in their career. And there are other examples that we'll talk about in that regard. So next slide, please. So we use this JobsEQ database to analyze what are called SOC codes, standard occupational category codes, or something to that effect. I don't remember what that first C stands for at the moment, but they're federal codes for different job types. And you can see that there's a range of wages, I'm happy to say, that are not too far off from what Haley was just showing. So thank you, Virginia. Standard occupational codes. So, and generally we found that, the more education and skills you have, the higher your wages generally can be. And, we talk about some kind of general categories of technicians, operators, and analysts. And that sort of takes you from an entry-level position to a more kind of sophisticated role operating these flying robots. And then an analyst would be someone who is focused on taking imagery collected from these platforms and turning it into useful information. And so these are the range of those outputs from our data that we found. Next slide, please. So this slide looks at how we were characterizing demand, and we used a function in this system called real-time intelligence, which draws job posting records in California and the North State study area over the last year, based on these different job code types. And you can see in this slide that the largest demand by far is in the category called engineering technologists and technicians, and that there is a significantly larger demand in the other than our North State Forestry area for those job types. So I think this reflects, of course, the inclusion of Los Angeles and the Silicon Valley in the larger California statewide data. But nevertheless, with expertise in engineering and being a technical focused worker, you could expect to have a higher demand for those job types. Next slide, please. So along with, one of the things about this BLS, Bureau of Labor Statistics data is, as Haley noted, they're retrospective. They look backwards into what the hiring patterns were in years past. And so we wanted to recognize that, with these emerging technologies, they may not yet be reflected in those historic data. And there may be other ways that that demand could be characterized. So we went ahead and looked at using keywords on those real-time intelligence job postings to get a better sense of additional criteria that might help us understand the demand. And what I think is most revealing out of that is, of the 4 different keyword types shown here: drone pilot, UAV, remote sensing, and GIS, that GIS was by far had the greatest demand, both in the study area and across California. And for anyone, I'm gonna assume that many people are familiar with GIS, or Geographic Information Systems. Think of Google Maps or Google Earth as kind of modern versions of those, but these tools have tremendous value for looking at patterns across space and time. And so these systems really are foundations for taking imagery captured using drones or other platforms and layering it into a system for sort of observing those trends. And so for somebody working in a forestry role that might be looking to characterize the stand condition across a watershed, other kinds of things like that, that have to do with space, having the ability to work with these tools would be a tremendously valuable job skill to have. So next slide, please. So along with trying to characterize demand using these data, we also recognize that our group, the Monterey Bay DART initiative, which is focused on growing a cluster of activity involving these technologies around the Monterey Bay region, we have, through that work, sort of an awareness of emerging and leading edge companies developing technology in the space. And some of them are shown here for 3 different capability types. So carrying different sensors, which allow the drones to be used for different purposes: change detection, landscape characterization, and health monitoring. These are 3 companies out there that we point out as kind of leading that development, and the job types within employment, either for those companies or in using those types of services for different agencies. Substance dispersal, we're talking about seed dispersal or controlled fire ignition. A great example of that is this company up in Seattle called Drone Seed, which is looking to rapidly scale reforestation after fires. And they're using employees with these kind of job titles. And then, as I mentioned before, cargo and transit or transport, that's heavy lift drones that can carry 50 pounds to 100 pounds of payload in a variety of settings. So there's a couple of great examples here: Parallel Flight and Elroy Air. So these are links which you can click on. I believe this slideshow will be on the website, and please take a look at these companies if you want to learn more. Next slide, please. So our study also made an effort to look at the question of equity in the workforce. Talking about growing this new workforce, we are aware that there is a unique opportunity to be proactive and explicit about being able to grow a workforce that represents the diversity of our state and our nation. So in our report, and I'm seeing some people having trouble with audio, but I don't know there's much I can do about that, so I'm just going to keep rolling on here. So the data we're showing here are recent census data, and basically showing that the non-Hispanic white population in the country is declining while all other races are growing. So I think nationwide we're becoming a more diverse country. Next slide, please. Also within the science, technology, engineering, and math workforce, there is a generally much smaller population of what we talk about as the BIPOC, the biracial, indigenous people of color. And that's shown in here in this slide with science and engineering workforce, and in particular in conservation and forestry. Next slide, please. Along with racial differences, there's differences in gender hiring in the field. And so all of these trends point to the need to be very proactive in trying to address these gaps. Next slide, please. This slide here talks about compensation, and it just shows again the way that men are paid more than women generally across the space. So we advocate for the proactive focus in taking extra steps to increase the diversity of the workforce with these new emerging tools in particular. And there is a report that goes along with this presentation where a lot of this material is covered in more depth. But I think this characterizes well what we found, what we put together in our study. And then we ended up with a way to describe the career pathway utilizing drones in forestry on the next slide here. So for folks with interest in maybe getting the attention of young people towards engaging in the study and preparation to be able to utilize these tools, this chart here is really intended to show, there's an entry point and some of the wage expectations you might have. So let's see. I wanted to close with a couple more slides, and then I know we have a video that kind of represents some of the stuff that we've done. One of the things I want to let everyone know about is this conference we're putting on next week in Monterey, which will cover a range of themes: security, mobility, and the environment. And we have a panel within the environment day that will focus particularly on forestry and wildfire, and will be keynoted by Glenda Humiston from the UC Ag and Natural Resource Division. But you would also be able to hear about the application of these tools in national security and homeland security, and as well as mobility, the movement of people. So take a look at that if you would like. And then the next slide, please. As was previously noted, this information is available on this website here, and we encourage you to go there and look at it, and feel free to reach out to me. I think I put up my email here at the end. And so I would just like to say thank you to the Morgan Family Foundation and to the California Stewardship Network, all the partners here. And that's my email. And then I think the last slide that I have is this video, which shows a number of my colleagues.
Josh and Haley, sorry, can you back up a slide before we get to the video? I have a couple of clarifying questions for Josh on the presentation first.
Right.
So thank you. Everybody is doing great on time. I really appreciate that with all of my speakers doing such a great job. So the first question, Josh, is related to wilderness designated areas, which we have, at least, in Tahoe, 70+% of our forests are Forest Service lands, and many of those are designated wilderness. And the state also has that all throughout the regions. So are there current restrictions for the use of drones in those wilderness designated areas? And is that something that you're thinking about addressing as part of this effort?
Yeah, I mean, most public land areas have some existing policy and constraints around the use of drones, and we by no means are advocating for free-for-all drone use. In fact, we advocate strongly for very highly regulated, safe and secure drone use. That's one of the reasons folks would want to get a go through the Part 107 license process, because all the kind of regulations are a big part of the certification. So anytime anyone was planning to go out and do drone operations, they would need to be, very proactive in exploring what any restrictions might be. Definitely during wildfire situations, the CDF is very clear that they discourage drone operations by, independent operators. There is a very active conversation going on about the potential use of drones in emergency situations. Oftentimes, in wildfires, the aircraft that are flown by humans are unable to fly due to visibility constraints. And so there are a number of use cases that are, potentially valuable, where unmanned operations could be made, integrated into the kind of wildfire management kind of tool set. That said, just with any flying systems, these are heavily regulated systems. They should only be done in close coordination with, official bodies and all of that.
Thank you. Josh, one more question before you introduce the video. And Haley, maybe pause hitting play so that Josh can kind of talk a little bit about the partners that created it. So the last quick clarifying question is, what qualifications do colleges and universities need to join the initiative?
Yeah, the FAA's initiative, I would recommend that you search the, and maybe we can put the link to that in the chat. I think we included in the report, but you would simply need to, I think mainly what we're trying to do is make you aware of this program, so that if it's of interest to your college or university, you look it up and find out what's needed.
Okay, so we will drop some more links in the chat for everybody. Josh can drop a link to the report in there. And then I just re-added the 2 links that will take you to the resources page where all of this information will eventually live. So this PowerPoint, the Monterey Bay DART report, the Chico State report, and workforce survey. So all of that information, thanks to our partners in Monterey, they have a great Career Connect website, and we will also be adding that to our Career Connect website here in Tahoe and many of our partners throughout the North State. So for each of the regions, your local community colleges and universities, we want to provide all these resources to you, and we think that's a great way to do it. So with that, Josh, do you want to introduce the video?
Sure. Yeah. So this video was a product of this collaboration, largely led by, in this particular instance, by 3 Corps out of Chico and their team, the Chico Media Group. They were able to come down to the Santa Cruz, Monterey area and talk with a number of our collaborators down here. You'll see in the video and a few of those: Justin Cummings, Becca Fenwick, and Michael Madkin in particular are co-authors on this paper, and Chris Bly, who operates an incubator space down on the Monterey Bay, is one of our co-founders. So this is intended to inspire young people to look this way if they're considering pursuing a career that deals with forestry and ecosystem management using tools of this type, and we hope it achieves that objective. So I think
Great.
Without further ado, let's show the video.
It's brand new. How did you? We just got it like yesterday.
currently there's like almost like a renaissance in aviation where it seems like anything is possible.
As the drone industry increases, the application of these drones increase, and people want to use them more, we're going to see more and more specific jobs that are drone pilots specifically.
Drones are great because it's a new tool that we're going to be able to use to do all sorts of, whether it's mapping or videography, surveying of infrastructure. I mean, it's a tool that we can use. And I think what's most important for young people to understand is that as you're getting your degree and as you're in school, try to pick up as many tools that you can apply across different disciplines.
It became very clear to me there were a lot of people, both faculty and students on campus, who were either working with drones or were interested in working with drones. And there are a bunch of projects on campus that had been developing sensor and drone systems that allow them to look at the conditions that cause wildfires and how to mitigate wildfires when they start. So we knew it was something that was going on, and we wanted to bring more attention to that and hopefully focus resources in a way that more of that work can be done.
Here in California, we've had a number of wildfires, and some of those have occurred in areas where we've been conducting these flights over multiple years. And so now there's an opportunity for us to look at, as these areas regenerate, do we see the same species coming back, or do we see new species coming in? And is that a result of climate change, or is that some other factor? Maybe they're invasive species, but having this data and information before disturbance and then after disturbance provides us with a real opportunity of understanding how these ecosystems change. But having background in biology is also really critical to being able to understand what's happening on the ground and being able to answer these critical questions.
So the fire services, working with them, we've identified 3 critical use cases. One is prescribed fire, and it's a huge land management tool, and also a tool for fighting wildfires. Then the second application is tactical resupply. So this is bringing stuff to guys on the front line. Well, if we want to deliver something as simple as a hot dinner to a crew of firefighters, just throw it on here and take off from a fixed location, bring it to the drop point, and put it on the ground. And then finally, eventually, we want to get to being able to actually put out spot fires by dropping, a payload of some kind of retardant on them. We're not super focused on that right now. We want to focus on those other 2 applications first.
This is the kind of equipment that is going to revolutionize the way we fight fires, and it's going to require this entire new generation of people to pilot these things. Speaking to the youth and just choosing an industry that's really going to be always changing and evolving, and I guess that's whether it's drones or traditional aviation or even aviation in general.
One part of it is being competent around operating the drone, uploading the software, uploading the maps. But then after you get that data, you need to use other software to stitch all those pictures together so that you get the map of area that you've flown. And then you also can use GIS in a number of different capacities to further analyze that data.
I think one of the most exciting opportunities, we have a lot of students who come in and they want to gain skills for entrepreneurial reasons too. They see an opportunity for them to apply drone technology in a new field, or also to innovate UAVs and drones themselves. So figure out new systems and new sensors that can be carried by drones.
Parallel Flight is not a typical drone company. We act as an OEM and a drone as a service company. So that really opens up the door for a lot of different roles. So of course, on the R&D side, there's your typical roles, right? Mechanical engineering, electrical engineering. Moving beyond that as well, there's drone pilots, people who are actually going to go out in the field and fly these systems, which I think would be pretty fun. If you gave me a choice at the beginning of the day, like I can go answer my emails, which is what I normally do, or go fly that, like I'd choose to go fly that because it would be a lot more fun.
I really enjoy working on these projects. You know, it fulfills like the science geeky tech side of my soul because I get to play with electronics and geek out on different types of cameras and different types of drones and what they can do, which is always super fun. But it also really speaks to being able to make a difference because the data that we're getting and the skills that we're able to give people through training is going to make a difference to how people manage the landscape and manage our ecosystems in the future, which is fabulous.
So what you're seeing today is really the start of